Democrats think that the way to win the next election is by selling out trans people.
Pete Buttigieg did an interview where he said that the issue of trans athletes was a complicated one, and people are obviously rightfully calling him out because that's not true and it's also transphobic.
One gay Democrat is learning the hard way that you can never, ever be woke enough. We're going to talk about Pete Buttigieg getting on the wrong side of the trans activist community and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, we're going to talk about this really wild saga that's playing out online right now where Pete Buttigieg, who, if you don't remember, is one of the more prominent gay Democrats in terms of their elected officials. He was mayor of a small town in Indiana. He ran for president in 2020, kind of had a moment, and then was made one of Biden's cabinet officials. He was made the transportation secretary under President Biden, and he was a pretty prominent Biden surrogate. He's generally considered a pretty articulate and well-spoken representative for the Democratic Party. And of course, he checks off an identity box being a gay man who is married with kids. However, Pete has presidential aspirations, I believe, or maybe Senate aspirations or some sort of desire to run for higher office. So he is doing the rounds and speaking about issues, in particular the trans issue and the question of trans athletes competing in women's sports. So biologically male people. And he gave an answer that has radicals on TikTok, but also just kind of general trans activists, but I repeat myself, losing their mind. Now, normally what I would do here is show you what he said and then show you the backlash. But I think it'll be more fun to do it the other way around. I'll show you what the angry mob coming for him with pitchforks is saying, and then I'll show you his actual comment. So stick around because I think it'll be funnier in that order. First, here's what the TikTok haters have to say to Mayor Pete for daring to suggest there might be any legitimate concerns by any parent about biological males competing in women's sports. Take a listen to their lovely feedback for Mayor Pete.
Not Pete Buttigieg. You too, and maybe I'm saying your name wrong, but everyone knows who I'm talking about. What the And I know we shouldn't be surprised. Like, he's a white, cis, gay man, and we all know the theme of the good gay, right? We always are sacrificing in movements that are social justice based, like civil rights based. We're always sacrificing the most vulnerable.
Hi, Pete Buttigieg. I know you're watching this video. Why did you say that? Who are you expecting to want to vote for you by saying that? I don't really understand.
So is he representation or is he just marketable? LGBTQ people make up 7% of the US population, but only account for 0.2% of all elected offices. And the vast majority of that 0.2% look exactly like Pete. They're cis, they're white, often masculine coded. But most importantly is that they're ideologically safe. The only queer people allowed in politics are those who are willing to make compromises. He's allowed to have a husband and kids, but he can't support trans rights.
Democrats think that the way to win the next election is by selling out trans people. This is Pete Buttigieg. He's a gay man, and he's the former transportation secretary, and he was mayor of a small town, ran for president, and now all of a sudden he's betraying his community because he thinks that questioning the fairness of allowing trans women in sports is going to give him a better shot at becoming president of the United States in 2028.
Pete Buttigieg did an interview where he said that the issue of trans athletes was a complicated one, and people are obviously rightfully calling him out because that's not true and it's also transphobic.
This headline has me so angry, I am literally shaking. I think it's pretty despicable and also a real canary in the coal mine to what we're up against in the 2026 and 2028 elections, that the most prominent gay member of the Democratic Party is so willing to throw the handful of trans athletes that exist under the bus by feeding into this bigoted and ignorant narrative. For what? Because it's not like the people who care about this were going to vote for his gay ass anyway.
There are so many layers and levels to discuss to this unhinged backlash. But first, guys, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit that like button if you haven't yet. Comment with your thoughts. Remember, you can also listen to the Brad vs. Everyone podcast on Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, yada, yada, yada. And The first issue with this is a simple question of media literacy, because these people are freaking out over a headline to articles that they clearly did not read. Because the craziest part of all this backlash is that if you actually look at what Pete Buttigieg said in the interview, he did not agree with Republicans. He did not agree with conservatives on this issue. Now, he should have, because they're on the right side of this issue, and the common sense position is to not allow biologically male people to compete in women's sports. But Mayor Pete didn't even do that. All he did was, in this NPR interview, which I'm about to show you, was say, like, yeah, there are legitimate concerns, and I understand why people might be upset, but we shouldn't be regulating this. We should just leave it up to communities and schools to deal with the issue. So I don't support these laws that ban, biological males from female sports. So he literally took the progressive left-wing position, but for the crime of acknowledging some degree of legitimate concern by people about this issue, they are blasting him as a traitor to the community. Absolutely unhinged. Watch what Pete actually said in this NPR interview. It is so different from what they describe.
What's your approach to that, and how would you try to appeal to people who disagree with you about it?
Well, I think the approach starts with compassion. Compassion for transgender people, compassion for families, especially young people who are going through this, and also empathy for people who are not sure what all of this means for them, like wondering, wait a minute, I got a daughter in a sports league. Is she going to be competing with boys right now? Right, and just taking everybody seriously. Mm-hmm. And I think when you do that, that does call into question some of the past orthodoxies in my party, for example, around sports, where I think most reasonable people would recognize that there are serious fairness issues if you just treat this as not mattering when a trans athlete wants to compete in women's sports.
Meaning the parent who's complained about this has a case, in your opinion?
Sure. And that's why I think these decisions should be in the hands of sports leagues and school boards and not politicians, least of all politicians in Washington trying to use this as a political pawn.
When President Trump says something like no boys and girls sports, which is a phrase that they use, it sounds like you're not signing on to that.
I think that chess is different from weightlifting, and weightlifting is different from volleyball, and middle school is different from the Olympics. So that's exactly why I think that we shouldn't be grandstanding on this as politicians. We should be empowering communities and organizations and schools to make the right decisions.
So I have my own complaints about this clip. I can't help but like Pete. He's clearly a sharp guy. I actually was on the same flight as him just last week to Traverse City, Michigan. But he has this weaselly politician brand of dodging questions and saying things that are completely kind of appealing to both sides, but really he's not saying much. Or he also has this talent, and it is a talent in the political realm, but it's something I personally can't stand, of taking a pretty extreme position, taking a 20-80, in a 20-80 issue, taking the 20% position, but making it sound like he's being moderate. And if you listen closely, that's what he's actually doing in this clip. He's saying, no, I don't support laws or regulations limiting just women's sports to females. We just leave it up to the communities. That's the whole debate, is over policies that enforce federal law, like Title IX, that establishes female sports. So it's a complete dodge, because you can't say just leave it up to the communities. It's already legislated federally. Women's sports. Title IX exists. So then the question has to be, under this federal law, does women's sports include biologically male people? And so he's totally dodging the actual question, and actually the substance of what he's saying implies that he would vote against the common sense laws that would restrict the sport. So he's actually agreeing with the radical position. But what's so funny to me about this is that just because he did that kind of politician thing where he gestures towards compassion and understanding the other perspective, they're crucifying him on TikTok and all over LGBTQ media world. That is insane. That is the most toxic and radical brand of progressive politics where even when people agree with your fringe stances, you still brutally attack them for even engaging in any sort of moderated rhetoric about it or trying to meet people in the middle or where they're at whatsoever. That it just tells me you know nothing about politics and you are an armchair quarterback who is content to yap on TikTok but never actually achieve anything, because in order to achieve anything, you have to be able to do at least what Pete does in this clip and not have your head bitten off by crazies on TikTok and throughout the LGBTQ activist community. There's some other substantive parts of the backlash that I want to talk about, like this notion or just this kind of disdain that radiates from these people for white gay men. The way they're talking about white gay men, it sounds like they are describing like trash, like vermin. They are so deep on the identity politics that they genuinely have developed a categorical disdain for one of the largest groups within the LGBT, like probably a plurality of the population. I don't know the exact numbers, but like a lot of the community, because they view them as basically the new straight white men, but just gay, like the privileged oppressors or whatever, with this totally flattening worldview that really tells you, it makes assumptions and makes massive assumptions about people's lives and the experiences they've had based on their immutable demographic traits, which is not something you can actually do in a reasonable or substantive conversation. But it's just like, how do you think your radical little movement is ever going to be successful by radiating disdain for not even just the majority, like straight people, but also the majority of the minority? Like, this is exhausting. And I also just have to totally disagree with the idea that if Pete had done the right thing, which is so funny because, again, they're mad at him and he didn't even do the right thing and agree with conservatives on this issue and had preserved female sports for females, then in no way would that actually constitute betraying the LGBTQ community, betraying gay people, or even sacrificing trans rights. There is no trans right to compete in a sex segregated sport for the sex with which you are not a member. That's not a thing. And simply, even a lot of people who are trans and who I totally support their right to live their life would agree that women's sports are for biological females only. And that's not an infringement on anyone's rights. It's just an enforcement of a categorical separation that exists for a reason. It is not transphobic or hateful. And by yelling that when people take common sense positions, I mean, you just have watered that down to the point of meaningless. Now, this crowd really has. So I thought this whole saga was absolutely deranged and laughable, but it's one of those stories that makes me so grateful that I am not a Democrat, that I am not a progressive, because trying to stay in these people's good graces seems absolutely exhausting. You will simply never, ever be woke enough. And Pete Buttigieg is learning that the hard way. What do you guys think of this crazy story? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Hit that like button while you're at it. And now, guys, we got to talk about a dark story. Honestly, there was this really tragic and horrifying shooting in New York City this past week. And one of the people killed, but actually by chance, they don't believe that this was targeted, was a CEO of a major investment firm, Blackstone, one of their divisions of the firm, not CEO of the whole company. And you can probably see where this is going. Yes, leftists on the internet are celebrating this woman and mother's death, rolling on her grave, taking a victory lap in truly demonic fashion, while clearly having no idea what they're talking about on any of the things they're saying about the company they're talking about. First, though, here's Fox News reporting on the shooting itself and the tragic lives that were lost.
4 people murdered, including police officer Didarul Islam. 36 years old, served on the force for just 4 years, and he leaves behind 2 young children, and his wife is pregnant with their 3rd child. The investment firm Blackstone is in that building, and one of the executives was killed, Wesley LePatner. Surveillance footage here shows the man police have identified as 27-year-old Shane Tamura walking toward that Park Avenue high-rise carrying heavy weaponry. Here is NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch.
The building's security camera footage shows the shooter enter the lobby, turn right, and immediately open fire on an NYPD officer. He then shoots a woman who took cover behind a pillar, where he shoots a security guard who was taking cover behind the security desk. The shooter then calls the elevator, which opens in the lobby. A female exits that elevator, and he allows her to walk past him unharmed. He goes up to the 33rd floor, which is route and management, and begins to walk the floor, firing rounds as he traveled. One person was struck and killed on that floor.
Employees inside their offices had stacked furniture and anything they could to find doorways against doorways on the 33rd floor, barricading themselves from the killer. The building is located in the heart of Manhattan on the famous Park Avenue.
So my heart goes out to everyone involved here. It's such a terrible, terrible story. So many people were traumatized in their workplaces. An innocent police officer was killed, just a brave man trying to serve his community. I'm honestly horrified by it, and I think most normal people are. But I kid you not, left-wing people on the internet are thrilled. They are celebrating this development. They think it's awesome and wonderful that this woman in particular, the Blackstone CEO of one of their divisions, was murdered in cold blood in a random act of violence. I hate that I have to show you guys this compilation, but I do. Take a look.
We got another one. Another executive was gunned down. Nice.
Blackstone CEO Wesley LePatner was murked in Manhattan yesterday. Wesley's company is responsible for buying up thousands of single-family homes across America in order to artificially inflate the price, pricing many Americans out of the option of owning a home. So I really only have one thing to say about her and her tragic death. Ha ha! Ha ha, you dumb bitch! What does karma taste like?
When the media emphasizes that a dead CEO had a family, it reminds me of when a defense team will emphasize that a rapist had a bright future ahead of him. Like, so did their victims. So do most people. Who gives a shit?
Let's go, it's CEO season again. Let's hope it lasts till December like it did last year.
That Blackstone CEO was a mother. So were the thousands of single mothers who have had their apartment buildings bought by companies like Blackstone only to have their rents driven up hundreds of percents so that they could be evicted and Blackstone could just make more money. She had a husband. Yeah, and that husband's probably never had to, nor will ever have to, look at his finances and try to figure out if he wants to pay the electricity this month or be able to buy food. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily think that all of our problems can be solved by gunning down random people in the street. Not random ones at all.
Oh no, the Blackstone executive got shot. I love those little griddles. Wait. Oh, it was the group that's single-handedly causing the housing crisis. Oh yeah, let's fire up our Blackstone and put some hot dogs on the griddle, some saucies on the grill. Yee, oh yeah.
If you're having a bad day, I just wanted to hop on to let you know that the CEO of Blackstone, a private equity real estate firm, was one of the victims in the recent shooting.
I don't really care. I'm going to say the quiet part out loud, but we need to make it dangerous to be a billionaire. We need to make it dangerous to be filthy rich. We need to make it dangerous to be racist, etc. You know what I mean? Because we need to make it to where people will go, do I really want to be a billionaire? I'm just gonna die. So why would I, you know what I mean? You know what I mean?
I'm almost left speechless by some of this. But guys, this is demonic. This is satanic. This is evil. What we just listened to is the face of pure, unadulterated evil. And it is a increasingly widespread sentiment online and with, young people who lean progressive in particular. I want to read you, I'm going to dive more into it for sure, but I want to read you guys some of the top comments on one of the TikTok videos from Daily Mail, I believe, just reporting on the news of this woman's death. Top comment: "She's looking up at us, heart emoji. Oh no, would someone please think of the rich person?" So she led the way on monopolizing the housing market during record homelessness for private gain. Nothing of value was lost. I needed this news today. Thank you. I will spend as much time mourning her as she did being concerned about the people whose lives she helped ruin. I'm too poor to care. Should have been a better person. IDK. Anyway, guys, there's a few key points here I want to discuss. First being that if really at any point, really in any scenario, you find yourself happy or feeling joy because a fellow citizen has been killed in cold blood, you might want to check that. That's not healthy. That's not normal. You should discuss that with a therapist or with God, because that's just like not what. I mean, maybe if it's like a global villain of some kind, even then, though, I mean, maybe you wouldn't be sad about it, but I don't really believe in celebrating death. I think that's a dark thing. And if you find yourself relying on the news of other people dying, of innocent people being victimized in this office building, and families being broken apart, and trauma and tragedy making you smile, making you happy, getting you through the day, like something in your life and in your soul is deeply broken. I mean that sincerely. Also, the idea that why would we care about her husband or her children suffering because they've not had to struggle to pay their bills is just strange to me. You can't have empathy for a wealthy person. Also, you're assuming they've been wealthy their entire lives and never had to struggle or never grinded or climbed at all, which I don't know their backstory, but that's not necessarily true. And regardless, you should still feel empathy for your fellow citizens who have their family members randomly killed in acts of violence, even if they're not worried about their mortgage payments. Like, what? And guys, I really just think the truth is that a lot of people hate success. They resent success because they feel deeply inadequate, or for understandable reasons, in some cases, they feel like they can't get ahead in life, so they hate the people that do. That I can't get on board with. I can't support that kind of resentment because it's not their fault that the system or society is set up or rigged in the ways that it is. And they may deserve to be where they are. Just because you've faced hurdles or you're not happy with your life doesn't mean they did something wrong. And economic success is not a zero-sum game where you're poorer because someone else is richer. Finally, guys, I have to just tell you, I don't think any of these people know what Blackstone is. I don't think they know what it means to be an investment firm. They certainly have no grasp of the reality of the real estate market and the role that institutional investors like Blackstone play in it. They have completely fabricated and mythological ideas about how that works. But also, they just totally ignore the important service and role that Blackstone or firms like it provide. For example, Blackstone is a massive investment firm, right? And over 100 million people worldwide rely on their investments for endowments, for universities, for pension funds that provide retirement benefits to nurses, firefighters, and teachers. It's like by making successful investments that grow over time, they enable millions of people to retire comfortably. So you're acting like this is some inherently evil corporation doing something terrible to the world. I'm not saying that they are, pure in everything they do or they've never made any unethical investments or anything of the sort. But like, just because they're a big investment company does not mean they are therefore evil and bad. They actually provide an important service for people and help millions of people. And when it comes to the role that firms like Blackstone play in the housing market, basically nothing these people believe is true. Housing prices are not high because corporate investors are buying up all the houses. That is a tiny, basically statistically irrelevant portion of the market. The reason that housing is so expensive is because there is a shortage of the supply of housing, because major metropolitan areas particularly make it very difficult and very expensive through zoning, through regulations, through these mountains and mountains of red tape to build housing. The solution is very clear. Build, build, build. It is not because institutional investors are buying up all the houses and jacking up prices. This is a myth. This is something that is spread like wildfire on social media, but has no basis in reality. I'm going to show you guys a couple graphs with the actual facts. 1, institutional ownership as a percentage of total single-family housing stock. Out of the total single-family housing stock of 105 million units, only 0.5% is owned by institutional investors, and that other than Blackstone, and then Blackstone owns 0.06%. So add them both together, and you're not even close to 1% of the total housing inventory. So even if they were these villains who were buying houses and trying to extort people as much as they can, which actually isn't true. They have a below average eviction rate. For 2 years during the pandemic, Blackstone owned real estate properties, didn't evict anyone. And they actually provide a lot of services and improvements. They specifically maintain certain affordable housing units. It's more complicated than them just being evil and just trying to price gouge everybody. But even if they were, it's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the market. They don't have monopolistic power. They're not the main cause. All of this is a hallucination. It is mythology spread like wildfire on social media with no basis in fact or truth. Some people say, yeah, well, they only have a small percent of the total housing, but they're buying up all the new housing. Also, fact check. False, not true. When you look at the data for what institutional investors are doing in terms of purchases, it peaked at less than 5% in 2021 and 2022. Institutional investors buy 1 to 2 to 3% of all new homes. They are not gobbling them all up. When you see statistics about how they bought 40% or they bought these big statistics, they are not real. They're not true. A lot of them go back to like Medium articles, not real sources. And guys, I almost feel like I shouldn't even be taking the complaints seriously, because even if everything they said was true, and again, it is not, but even if Blackstone really was buying up all the houses and causing all these problems, the solution would be to pass laws and regulations prohibiting them from doing so, to pass supplements for affordable housing, to use the political process in our country to fix the problem, not to support murder of random CEOs. That is textbook what these people are advocating for. Killing CEOs and billionaires as a form of political protest is textbook terrorism. We have a significant chunk of the left in this country that openly supports terrorism against the wealthy and against business people. And that threatens the very fabric of our country. It really does. Far more than any myth about corporate investors buying up housing. But what do you guys think? Have you seen these grotesque celebrations of a woman's murder? Let me know in the comments. Do hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. And guys, another Nazi commercial just dropped and has woke people online losing their crap. This time it is an actor from the show The Summer I Turned Pretty who did an ad with Dunkin that has woke people on the internet losing their shit. Let's take a look at a compilation featuring some interesting individuals melting down over this Dunkin ad for a summer refresher drink. Let's listen.
Look, I didn't ask to be the king of summer. It just kind of happened. This tan? Genetics. I just got my color analysis back. Guess what? Golden summer. Literally.
Who the f***'s coming out with one next? They're getting bold. They were already bold, but they're getting f***ing bold right now. Holy shit.
You too, Dunkin'? Seems weird because, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Dunkin' Donuts is like a Massachusetts-based business, and so it seems weird to be taking this like Aryan race type stance.
Yeah, I just watched the Dunkin' Donuts ad, and it's problematic for so many reasons. First of all, it's certainly disappointing to see genetics brought up in a similar way as a Sydney Sweeney ad. It just goes to show that there's never an innovative or original idea in Hollywood. But before I loop back to the genetic end, I actually want to talk about this idea of being crowned king. In this climate, to put forth an ad about being crowned king weeks after the No Kings protests, I don't understand it from a perspective of like, unless you're an actual monarchy or Burger King, why are you crowning anyone king in America right now?
As if American Eagle doing it wasn't bad enough, now we've got Dunkin' Donuts doing eugenics. Once again, touting genetics and perfect golden skin. The fact Dunkin' felt comfortable enough to make this ad in the first place, but now definitely they feel comfortable enough to post it because of the shit with American Eagle and Sydney Sweeney. This is absolutely disgusting. These companies are getting far too comfortable with fascism and eugenics and leaning into it, and y'all need to be paying attention.
Dunkin' Donuts, you two? You made a eugenics commercial too? They got them gas chambers up and running. Y'all can't convince me that they don't. This gotta be a psyop. If you hear genetics, you know what the fuck is good. They are coming for us.
This is a new level of deranged. Now, I want to be clear. I do have my own complaints about this commercial, which I liked, but it could have been better. Why is his shirt buttoned? Why is he wearing a shirt at all? I think the ad could have actually been improved, Duncan, because he is, I have no idea who he is, but he is quite something. I would actually say he has pretty darn good genetics even, like, because he's hot. And yes, guys, it is a fact that your skin and how well it tans versus burns is genetic. Like, that is not the level of leaps you have to make to get from there to fascism, Nazi, whatever, is insane. It's not that deep. They're just trying to say he tans well, he has good genes, and they're trying to make him attractive and then associate that with their drink and their brand. This has never been controversial. The simple existence of like genetics. They again, like, they need to learn the difference between genetics and eugenics. Eugenics is when you like try to breed a master perfect human race through selective breeding and through sterilizing undesirables and all this dystopian stuff, not simply acknowledging that like some genes or some people have certain good genes that are desirable. That is not eugenics. That is just the existence of genetics. And LOL at the idea that it's problematic for them to declare an actor the king of summer as they're selling a golden hour drink because, well, that's triggering because we're worried about a king in America right now. And didn't you see our little no kings protest? No, most people didn't. Most people don't know what that is. And most people are not going to make any sort of connection between branding this Gavin dude, the king of summer, in this Dunkin' commercial and monarchism, like in our political system. Just the layers of brain. I mean, someone break out the gold medal for mental gymnastics in the same way. I love how like these people don't understand that most of America is not as terminally online as they are, is not as brain rotted as they are, because, well, why would you do this if you're based in Massachusetts? And listen, as somebody who grew up in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, I can tell you Dunkin' is based in Massachusetts. In fact, there are more Dunkins in Massachusetts than there are in the rest of the country combined. You can literally find a Dunkin' Donuts on basically every street corner, basically every gas station in Massachusetts. And even though it is a deep blue state, even though it is a hardcore liberal state and like most of the population leans significantly to the left, other than the like non-binary college students or the TikTok creators, no one who sees this ad is going to be remotely bothered by it. No normal human being, even a lib, even a Democrat, even a progressive adult living in Massachusetts with a job, only unemployed non-binary people are offended by this. And again, I just think they are doing the actual victims of the Nazi regime so dirty by the frivolous invocation of this dark era of human history. They are crying wolf. They have done this so long for so many so many different things that where they dilute the power, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, all these things. When you invoke them constantly, people stop listening. I don't know how far things have to go before they get it. That this is not either like true or sensible or sane or even smart in terms of preserving progressive values or having anybody listen to any of your warnings. People tune you out when you are this deranged. They really do. I also just have to say, I think some of these people just resent hot people existing, particularly hot white people. I really do. Now, what's so funny to me is that over on TikTok, I love when like some woke shit happens and then the even woker people attack the woke people for not being woke enough. That is happening right now because all the TikTok people are so mad at Sydney Sweeney and Dunkin' Donuts for the eugenics that they hallucinated. And now other ultra woke people are tisking the woke people, saying if you really cared about eugenics, you would be still wearing a mask. Take a listen to this song.
If you're talking about eugenics, wear a mask. If you're talking about eugenics, wear a mask. If you saw the Sweeney ad and agree that it was bad, it would be oh so rad to wear a mask.
So, not wearing a mask, simply existing in the default state of being a human and not wearing a face diaper that in many cases, like your cloth mask isn't even doing anything, is not in fact participating in eugenics. That's not a thing, but some of these people, I'm genuinely concerned. I am genuinely concerned about a lot of these people. They are not well, but somehow they still exert some sort of cultural force and are reaching millions of people with this absolutely deranged perspective and hysteria, which, as we've discussed before, can lead people to a pretty dark place where they support some really dark, radical, drastic measures. Also, shout out to Dunkin'. I give them props because it's probably a coincidence that they recorded this ad mentioning the word genetics. And I doubt that that was like planned or that they knew the Sydney Sweeney thing was coming out. But to then hit release with all this shitstorm happening over that is kind of savage and shows that in corporate America, they've realized that most people will not be bothered by the thing that like woke people melt down over, and that all the publicity might actually help more than it hurts. So I think that's kind of a savage call by the Dunkin' executives. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Hit that like button while you're at it. And that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll talk again real soon.